Dan? Oh, how many years?
About 47 years actively.
All right, Dan, why don't you do the duty?
Okay.
Go ahead and turn that on for us.
Okay, here we go.
Where is Dan Henskee? Something feels very wrong in the latest episodes, and the viewers are starting to notice the missing faces. Dan Henskee is the stoic expert who knows every inch of the mud and the oak trees, but he's barely on camera. Maybe there's a simple explanation, but his history with the island goes back to the 1960s. And nobody expected this to happen, but the fact of the matter is, the show is shifting focus and leaving the legends in the shadows. Why is the man who gave his life to the search suddenly gone? Search for Dan Henskee. Fans are looking at the screen and seeing a lot of new faces, but one very familiar face is missing. Dan Henskee's been a staple of the show since the very first day, and his connection to the island goes back long before the cameras started rolling. In the latest episodes of Season 13, people notice that he's not sitting in his usual spot during the big meetings. For starters, he's usually there to give a nod or a short piece of advice based on his 50 years of experience. Now, the chair's empty and the silence is starting to get loud. There are still many rumors on the air, but what many can confirm is that the show's moving in a different direction. It's not that simple, though, because you can't just replace a man who's lived on the island for decades. The crazy part is that Dan was one of the few people who actually worked with Dan Blankenship back in the day. He knows where the old holes were dug, and he knows why some of the tunnels are dangerous. Before we go further, if you love deep dive breakdowns like this, make sure you're subscribed to Bravo Tango. It's the only channel that tracks every clue, every crack in the ground, and every discovery the moment it happens. Now, back to the show. What most people don't realize is that his absence is making the search feel a bit more like a scripted drama and less like a real hunt. Hands down, he's the most authentic person on the island. People are asking if he's okay or if he's just decided that he's had enough of the mud and the cold. Season 13 premiered with a lot of energy and big promises about the swamp. We saw the Lagina brothers talking about the garden shaft and the massive circular structure. But while they were talking, the camera panned across the room and Dan wasn't there. This happened in episode 4 and again in episode 5. It's not just a one-time thing anymore. It looks like a pattern. Fans on the internet are tracking every minute of screen time, and they say Dan's dropped by over 90%. That's a massive change for someone who's considered a main cast member. Maybe he's just tired of the long days. He's in his 80s now, and the work on the island is very physical. Even sitting in the war room for 10 hours a day can be hard on a person. But here's the catch. The show hasn't mentioned a single thing about him being sick or retiring. They just act like everything's normal while the fans are losing their minds. This is a key detail because it shows how the production team handles the older members of the crew. They seem to focus on the young experts who use lasers and computers, while the guys who use shovels are pushed aside. It feels like the end of an era for the island. The old secrets are starting to fade away as the veteran hunters leave the island for good. The legacy of the island, veteran. To understand why everyone's so worried, we have to look back at how Dan Henskee got to the island in the first place. He didn't just show up for a reality show. He arrived in 1965 to help a man named Robert Dunfield. Back then, the island was a mess of huge craters and heavy machinery. Dan was a young man with a lot of energy, and he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. He eventually started working for Dan Blankenship, who was the king of the island for a long time. They spent years together trying to solve the mystery of Borehole 10X. Dan Henskee was actually one of the people who helped build the casing for that deep shaft. He's seen the island change from a private hobby to a world-famous television production. And that's putting it lightly because he's probably moved more dirt than almost anyone else alive. The crazy part is that he used to live in a small shack right on the island. He didn't go to fancy hotels or have a trailer. He was a true resident of the land. This gave him a perspective that nobody else has.
What are you here, 50, 40-some years?
Yeah, 40 some odd, yeah.
Dan? Oh, how many years?
About 47 years actively.
He knows the sounds of the woods and the way the tide affects the water and the shafts. When the Lagina brothers bought into the island, they knew they needed him. Rick and Marty Lagina have always shown him a huge amount of respect. They call him a mentor and a friend. See, in the early seasons, Dan was always the one they went to when they found a piece of wood or a strange rock. He'd look at it and tell them exactly which year it probably came from. He was like a living library of treasure hunting history, but as the years go by, the library's getting harder to access. In season 12, he was still showing up, but he looked a bit slower. He'd stand near the edge of the pits and watch the excavators work. You could see the years of hard labor in the way he moved. Yeah, about that. The fans loved seeing him because he represented the link to the past. He was the one who could talk about what the island looked like before the big roads are built. Now that link's breaking. If he's not there to tell the stories, then the history of the island might get lost in the middle of all the high-tech graphics. It's a sad thought for people who've been watching since the beginning. New discoveries are being made every day, but the stories behind them are becoming much shorter. Health rumors and hidden truths. Whenever a star disappears from a popular show, the internet starts to invent stories. Everyone's obsessed with finding out the real reason for his absence. Some people think he's had a major health scare that's kept him from traveling to Nova Scotia. It's a long flight from where he spends his winters, and the weather on the island's notoriously bad. We're talking about freezing winds and heavy rain that can make a healthy person feel sick. For a man in his 80s, it could be even more dangerous. But here's the catch. There's no proof that he's in the hospital or struggling with a serious illness. People who live near the island say they've seen him in town grabbing coffee or talking to locals. So if he's healthy enough to be in the area, why is he not on the show? This is where the theories get a bit more complicated. Some fans think it's a matter of money or contracts. Maybe the History Channel wanted to pay him less because he doesn't talk as much as the other experts. Or maybe he just wanted a quieter life. He's never been a man who craves fame. He doesn't have a big social media page, and he doesn't go to fan events to sign pictures. He's always been a private person who just wanted to find the treasure. What most people don't realize is that reality TV can be very stressful. You've got to repeat lines and stand in the same spot for hours while the crew fixes the lights. Maybe Dan's just decided that he's done with the performance part of the job. He might still be helping the Lagina brothers in private without the cameras being there. That would explain why his name's still in the credits, but his face isn't in the episodes. It's a smart move if you want to keep your privacy, but it's hard for the fans who feel like they know him after 13 years. They want to see him get a proper goodbye if he's actually leaving. Just fading away feels wrong for a legend of his stature. The show owes him a lot of its success because he gave it a sense of mystery and depth. Evolution of the search team. The show's changing, and it's happening right before our eyes. If you look at the cast of season 13, it's full of scientists and specialists. They're people who study old pollen, and people who test the chemical makeup of the water. This is great for finding facts, but it changes the tone of the show. It used to be about a group of guys who are chasing a dream. Now it feels like a corporate operation with a lot of rules and data points. Dan Henskee doesn't really fit into a world of data points. He's a man of intuition and experience. He doesn't need a computer to tell him that a certain area of the swamp feels important. The Lagina brothers still value him, but the producers might think he's not exciting enough for the younger viewers. The crazy part is that the younger viewers are the ones who are asking where he is. They like the grit and the history that he brings to the screen. Hands down, he's more interesting than a guy in a lab coat. But the reality is that the show keeps moving forward. They got to find new ways to keep the mystery alive after hundreds of episodes. Sometimes that means bringing in new experts like Dr. Ian Spooner or the guys from the drilling company. These new people take up a lot of the airtime because they have to explain their complex theories. This leaves very little room for a quiet man like Dan to share his thoughts. It's a bit like a sports team that replaces its veteran players with rookies. The rookies might be faster, but they don't have the wisdom of the old pros. This is a key detail because the island has a way of tricking people who think they're too smart. Dan knows the traps and the dead ends. He's seen people fail for 50 years. If the team stops listening to him, they might end up making the same mistakes that are made in the 1970s. That would be a huge waste of time and money for the Lagina family. They've already spent millions of dollars on this search, and they can't afford to ignore the lessons of the past. Final chapter of Legend. So where's Dan Henskee, and will we ever see him again? The truth is probably a mix of all the things we've talked about. He's getting older, and the island's a tough place to work. He probably wants to spend more time with his family and less time in front of a camera. But we should also remember that he's given more to this mystery than almost anyone else alive. He was there when Dan Blankenship was still walking the island, and he'll be there in spirit as long as the search continues. The Lagina brothers have always been loyal to their crew, and they'll likely give Dan a big tribute when the time's right. For now, we have to accept that his role is smaller. Maybe he's just a consultant now who answers the phone when Rick has a question about an old tunnel. It's not exactly what the fans want, but it's a natural part of life. Everyone grows older, and the torch has to be passed to the next generation. The important thing is that we don't forget what he did. He kept the dream alive during the years when nobody cared about Oak Island. He stayed when the money ran out, and the weather turned bad. That kind of loyalty's rare in this world. Yeah, about that. The island might finally give up its treasure in season 13 or 14, and if it does, Dan Henskee should be the first one to see it. He's earned it more than anyone. What most people don't realize is that the treasure's not just gold, it's the story of the people who searched for it. Dan's a huge part of that story, and his legacy will live on as long as people are talking about the money pit. So the next time you watch an episode and you see that empty chair in the war room, just remember the man who sat there for so many years. He's still a hero to the fans and a legend of the North Atlantic. The engines might be quieter without him, but the search goes on. Will the search for the treasure ever be the same without the wisdom of the original hunters? Or are we watching the end of an era? Is the high-tech approach better than the old-school grit? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if you want to stay ahead of every breakthrough and every twist in the mystery, make sure you're subscribed to Bravo Tango. We're here for every discovery, no matter where the trail leads next.